This week, doing a bit of kit bashing? Well, mostly, as the majority of the pieces are just 3D printed from Wargames Atlantic Fantasy Cultist set. But I didn't care for the arms, so I played around with a few bits from my bits box. Tried a Stargrave head, and then eventually settled on some Perry Miniatures Afghan Warrior arms I'd left over from a previous kit bash. So there will be one Radioactive Priest with a glowing orb and a staff, and then 2 followers armed with rifles. So ideally, these will be usable on a pulp setting, as well as a post-apocalyptic one. The arms fit basically out of the box, but I did have to trim a bit of the right shoulder, where it has a pauldron covering part of the join. To start the assembly, I mounted them on the base, and gave them time to fully dry. Then, working through each of the minis, I mounted the arms on using more superglue. I then let the Mind Flare have one last chance at changing my mind, before going with the original head. It's worth mentioning here that I did have a few kind of print fails while printing this guy out, but a lot of it was just kind of the end of tassels or a little bit on the top of the staff, so I feel like it kind of fits a bit more into that post-apocalyptic theme. So with the arms I went for one guy kind of at ease and reloading, while the other guy's running in a bit of a dead sprint. Before priming them, I made up the bases using some Vallejo texture paste, giving that a rough lumpy coating over the base so you get a bit of variance with it. And before that dried, I dropped a few tiny gravel stones in, as well as 1 or 2 larger aquarium pebbles. A useful way to blend these into the base is once you sprinkle them over, then just give them a slight tap with the tool, or add a tiny bit more texture paste around the base just to blend them in so they seem like they're submerged instead of sitting on top of the ground. Once the texture paste on the base had fully dried, I then applied a layer of Vallejo black surface primer over the entire thing, including the base. This was followed up by a base coat of dark brown, missing out a few of the recesses, and for the majority of these paints I'm using AK Interactive, but there are a few paints which are P3 from Privateer Brass. I like using dark brown as a base coat because I tend towards a warmer palette, and it all kind of ties together with a nice earthy tone at the end. With the base coat down, I went in and blocked the main colours, starting with a cloth, and using a gunship green. I wasn't fully sure what colour I wanted the robes to be at this point, so green felt like a fairly safe option. Using a rusty brown colour, I went in and applied some tones to the face, as well as the exposed hands. Moving on to a P3 metallic boiler black paint, I hit the gun barrel as well as the trigger details and some of the details on the armour, such as the clasps and the pauldron. This same colour was used on the collar and the headdress of the priest as well. I decided I wanted the cuirass to be leather, so using an orangey brown, went in and gave a base coat, before weathering with a tan brown, lightly dry brushed over the top just to catch the edges and make it look a bit more worn. Using the same tan colour, I then went in and hit the staff on the priest, as well as the edges of the mask where I wanted it to be bone. The side pieces on the headdress here are meant to be two tassels that go down a fair way, but they both snapped off when I tried to remove the support, so they became part of the bone instead. Moving back to the robes and the cloth sections, I went in with a green-brown, which is a much lighter colour, and put some fairly heavy highlights on, focusing mainly on the top half of the model, such as the top of the sleeves and the hood, where you'd get more of the light. For the fur cloak, I did a very quick dry brush of a mid-brown, followed by an even lighter dry brush of a very pale tan colour. Jumping back to a P3 metallic, I used a bronze colour this time, for the rings around the sash, as well as the clasps on the top of the cuirass. I also thought it would be fun if he had some radioactive glowing elements on his staff and his headdress, so going in with a white colour, I hit the eye in the middle of the staff, as well as the eyes on his headdress, the emblem on the top of it, and the orb in his left hand. With that white paint now completely fully dry, I could go in with a lime green paint, and applying it more heavily in the centre, while working out with less and less paint, I could build up some fake lighting effects and make it appear as though he's covered in radioactive equipment. Using the same lime green paint, I also hit the emblems on the front of the cuirasses for the regular guys. This left only a few finer details to work on, such as the bolts in the corners of the cuirass. The eyes. And the wood grain on the rifle butt. Then moving on to the weathering, using a diluted orange paint to apply a few little bits of rust in the corners of the metallic armour, so a tiny bit on the two soldiers, and then some more on the priest headdress and armoured collar, which is a good way to break up some kind of flat metallic panels if you have them. The final weathering was to dry brush over the base and the lower part of the skirts with a tan brown colour, to pick out the details of the texture paste and make it appear that they've been travelling through the wasteland for a while. The very final touch is to apply one or two tiniest of tufts on the base. And with that, I was happy with it. So we have this fancy looking radiated priest and his two henchmen. And scale wise they fit in with the previous Wargames Atlantic stuff, and the more kind of realistic proportion stuff such as Perry Minis. But anyway, thanks for watching, I'll catch you next time.